Welcome back to episode 3 of Darts News Weekly. Not quite weekly because I had a week off and Sam had a week off as well last week thanks to fire arrangements. But we're back again and plenty of darts news and tournaments to run through from the weekend. Sam, how are you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Yeah, busy weekend as per usual. As for yourself, with the boxing, with seconds out as well. You had a very busy weekend, but yeah, I'm looking forward to speaking darts as usual.
Yes, nice to get back to the darts. I will admit I haven't seen all of the darts from the weekend because I was working on the boxing. Saw bits and pieces of the women's series and a few bits from the Euro Tour. And we're going to start with the women's series. We've got 2 new World Championship qualifiers. Well, 1 new World Championship qualifier. Of course, seen Lisa there before. Lisa Ashton and Dieter Hedman. They'll both be playing in the PDC Worlds. Looking forward to seeing them both.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, Ashton acquitted herself really well a few years ago when she played Jan Decker and took a set off him, and could have been a bit like Mikura Suzuki last year. She could have been the history maker. And in my opinion, she often doesn't get the fair crack she deserves for what she's done because, of course, and as much as Fallon was excellent last year, Lisa did go on and get a tour card. But yeah, she was exceptional all weekend, to be honest, including in the Grand Slam qualifier on Friday as well. She only lost a few legs in the end in that. And on the Saturday in the first event, it was the same thing. She carried on that form. Of course, as you'll go on to with Dieter as well, she was the class of the field all weekend. As much as Ashton and Sherrick did play really well, she was the class of the field. And I'm sure you'll go on to that later on.
Yeah, as you mentioned with Dieter, I know she'd had quite a lot of time off from darts during the lockdown period. And she came back at the Challenge Tour, I think it was the weekend before, and threw some pretty good darts considering she hadn't been throwing. I think for her in particular, that was a superb warm-up for the women's series. Of course, lots of them haven't had the chance and the stage to play over the last few months. And with Dieter playing on the Challenge Tour, and obviously Lisa playing on the Pro Tour over the last few months with the autumn series and the summer series, of course, they've had a bit of a base to sort of get going in the women's series, and I think it really did them well, especially Dieter.
Yeah, I'd wholeheartedly agree with that. And somebody even said the other day when they were talking about the women's series that it was quite ironic that the top 4 in the women's series, so you had Lisa, Dieter, Fallon, and Corinne Hammond have all played on the Challenge Tour or the Pro Tour and have that experience of playing at that higher level and can produce the higher averages. It's often about timing. With this, in my opinion, with the women's series, like you need more events going forward. It was a massive success as we saw on social media over the weekend. Everybody was following it. It kind of eclipsed the Euro Tour, so to speak, which at a venue like the Glas Palast in Sindelfingen, which is a Euro Tour staple. It was quite weird to see it kind of on the back burner, but yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how they can capitalise on this. And of course, congratulations to Lisa and Dieter on making it to the World Championships.
Yeah, I agree. I think we'll see a lot more of the women's series moving forward. Maybe 3 or 4 of these weekends moving forward, like a summer series or an autumn series, even. Maybe even latched onto the side of a challenge tour or something. You just don't know at the moment. There's so many options that the PDC could take with it. But nice to see that over 80 competitors at the women's series over the weekend, and support for the event was good. And with obviously the world as it is at the moment, I expect that to be a lot more in whenever it may be. One thing you did mention, obviously, Lisa's achievement of getting the tour cards. There's always discussion, which is who's the better player, Lisa Ashton or Fallon Sherrick. You can't really compare the achievements of winning at the Alexandra Palace to winning a tour card. They're both very different games and very different achievements. But I know we mentioned just before we came on air and we started recording that we still think that Fallon Sherrick will manage to get into the World Championship because there's lots of nations where their host qualifiers has been cancelled. You know, the Asian Tour, I think there were 4 names from the Asian Tour that aren't going to be there this year, unfortunately. So they're going to have to pick either from a last chance qualifier and the PDB qualifier in late November, or it's going to come from wild cards. And you've got to think that Fallon Sherrick would be right up there as one of those picks.
Oh, 100%. In terms of the PDC Asia, we've had it with the World Cup even in the past week with the Philippines withdrawing due to PDC Asia not actually giving them any sort of assurances that they wouldn't have to quarantine when they came over to Austria. And of course, Austria is different to the UK, but it's still part of Europe. So ultimately, I would definitely say that Fallon has quite a chance at making it to the Alexandra Palace at the end of the year, especially with how she ended up finishing over the weekend. How she only lost out on leg difference. You could argue that she would be deserving of that place. She would just get thrown in compared to other players. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see Fallon at the World Championships whatsoever. I think she'll be there no matter what.
Yeah, certainly wouldn't be a case of just throwing her in. There were three outstanding names at the women's series. We mentioned the three names: Fallon Sherrick, Dita Hedman, and Lisa Ashton. They were sort of head and shoulders above the rest, really making regular semi-finals, finals, and winning the tournaments. Obviously, did see a few other names sort of pop in and out. Corinne Hammond, you mentioned, Laura Turner. Made a couple of latter stages, and Rhiannon O'Sullivan looked good at times. But it's a case of only time will tell with those names. The more action they get in that professional environment, the more we'll see of them and challenging the big names, so to speak.
Yeah, in terms of continue on with the Sherrick with the World Championships, in my opinion, if you put her in and if you've got multiple spots anyway, I'll put somebody like Corinne Hammond in as well. Especially considering her form over the weekend, instead of, because you're going to get people complaining no matter what, or complaining or be happy that she's in the World Championships. Fallon, we kind of saw that on social media over the weekend, that people were kind of split about Fallon, and I'd say if you put Fallon and Corinne in, or even a few more players, and kind of make up the numbers that way, you won't get as many people complaining about the situation. And of course, Corinne deserves it. She played brilliantly over the weekend, and like I said, her experience on the Challenge Tour and playing in that environment as well. She kind of surprised me over the weekend, Corinne Hammond, because her form over the past few years, barring a few appearances on the big stages in the BDO, hasn't exactly been brilliant. But she showed that she's still got the game. So yeah, like you say, in terms of the women's series as a whole, they do need more chances. It's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't know with the women's series, because Barry Hearn always says that it's a tour for all men and women. So would you have a women's tour as an aside to a challenge tour or a development tour, or would you have it as an associate tour like the Nordic and Baltic tour that we have on the side, where players can win tour cards or tickets to the World Championships or even Euro tours even? Would you kind of have that as an aside and still have the likes of Lisa Ashton, Fallon Sherrick being able to qualify and play on the main tour through Q School? It's kind of a big debate to have in the next few months, but it's good to see it was a big success in the end.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think there's a certain chance for players to gain tour cards in the future through the women's tour. Of course, we see it already in the Challenge Tour and the Development Tour. So with the standard of players at the top end of the women's tour, they could definitely compete on the Pro Tour. And to see them given the opportunity to gain tour cards would be a step in the right direction, as in making them professional players. Because at the moment, you've got to say that isn't their profession. But gaining a tour card, as with all players, no matter what gender, is a case of becoming a more professional player, and playing on the Pro Tour is the first kind of step in the right direction there.
Especially with the demise of the BDO as well. The only potential action they may have next year, depending on the situation with the WDF and MAD coming into proceedings and kind of what that'll look like, we still don't know yet. With WDF, they've kind of had to put stuff on hold, and MAD have not really actually released their blueprint yet and not implemented anything yet. So they've got to kind of strike while the iron's hot, have that in the background with the amateur darts, if they can form relationships with them, how they can have a sort of amateur / professional tour potentially, involving the likes of MAD or WDF, and partner up with one of them and almost do it that way, so they can continue that kind of BDO style events they've had before. I'd say that would be a potential idea to put on the table, because of course with the BDO going down, it kind of showed at times over the weekend with some of the standard that they haven't had the time on the board. The only time that's I'll probably say probably about 5 players, so like the likes of Laura Turner, Lorraine Winstanley, Fallon Sherrick, of course, have all been in like the likes of the Modus League, the Remote Darts League. But barring that, women's players haven't really had the opportunity to play. And so they've got to kind of strike while the iron's hot. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what comes next.
Next, we'll have a quick look at the Euro Tour over the weekend. Some impressive performances to push players into the European Championship, just a couple of weeks away now. And we have a new Euro Tour winner in Jose de Souza. Thoroughly deserved, you must say, Sam.
Yeah, stunning win on Sunday. I was saying to you before we came on that probably one of the best games I've seen this year. There's been many, but he was up there. The way he was battering Van Gerwen, that's the word I'd use. And yeah, he was very good over the weekend. It's like I said about it's been coming. It was only third event on the Euro Tour as a whole, which was actually surprising when I heard it on commentary on Sunday night. They took in that little time, but we've seen with de Souza and Peterson, who both faced each other at the World Grand Prix recently, that two of the biggest informed players. Of course, Peterson didn't really play well at the weekend, but that's he can have a lapse in form. But yeah, thoroughly deserved winner, and one that kind of came under the radar really for me during the tournament because of the likes of Van Gerwen, performances that all go Mike Kuyvenhoven, players like that, who played really well in Sindelfingen. But yeah, deserved winner in the end for me.
Yeah, because the sort of schedule of the Euro Tour has been condensed considerably, there are chances for some of the lesser players, shall we say, to get a spot in the European Championship. Scott Waits is hanging on at the moment. As you mentioned, Mike Kuyvenhoven is looking strong for a spot now. And Adam Hunt's not far away. I mean, he hasn't produced brilliant performances on the Pro Tour, but a good run in the Euro Tour can push you in there. And there are some names that you maybe wouldn't expect to see. They're going to get some chance in a major TV event.
In terms of names, though, on the other hand, you had the likes of Ian White over the weekend, which was a pivotal weekend for him. As one of the main seeds on the Euro Tour, he might not have even been at the European Championships in a week's time. I know it's only been 3 events for White, but before Sindelfingen this weekend, it was a bit. I'd say it was a bit of a crisis for White. He kind of rode his up potential at the start of the weekend, but got very strong in the end, and yeah, beat Kuyvenhoven on the way to it. So from not, like you say, one weekend can kind of change things at the moment, especially with this season being as truncated as it is. Another name I'd throw in would be Darius Labanauskas, a personal favourite of mine. He reached the latter stages. Yeah, he always seems to find his way in at the moment to tournaments, and him and Adam Hunt have both gotten into the European Championships at the moment as a result of this weekend. But then you get the opposite, which would be Nico Kurtz as well, who hasn't really played that well, but because of the virtue of him getting one of the top 2 spots on the European Tour, because of how small the season is, he will likely be in the European Championships anyway. A bit like with the World Series, but for the Euro Tour. So yeah, it's kind of. I definitely say Riesa next weekend will be pivotal. It wouldn't surprise me to see multiple names outside the top 32 qualify in the end for the end of season event, and 1 or 2 big names actually missing out overall.
Yeah, there's always surprises with the European Tour and the European Championships in particular. Some of the big names, I'll just read off a couple of the big names that are missing out currently. Chris Dobie is 35th on the order of merit. Dimitri Vandenberg, the reigning match play champion, is 43rd. And there's plenty of other big names. Brendan Dolan's down there. Luke Humphreys is a long way down the order of merit. And there are just some names that you'd expect to be up there in contention, and they've not made it, unfortunately. Gerwyn Price obviously leading the order of merit ahead of Devin Peterson currently. The order of merit in the Euros is very different to the Pro Tour, and you've got to fight to be in those events now.
Yeah, another name I'd throw in would be Steve Beaton. plain and simple. He's very well known for qualifying for European Tour events. He's kind of, whenever he's actually been in the qualifiers, he's probably qualified for every single event in the past 2 years. But he's sitting currently down in 45th place on £2,000. And so he'll be one to watch. I'm not 100% sure if he's actually qualified for Risa next weekend. He might have done, especially if he had to come through the qualifier, but without having the field actually next to me, I'm not 100%. But yeah, if he is in, it will be quite a pivotal weekend for Steve. And yeah, it's like you say, with the European Championships, there will be one or two names who do miss out. Dimitri, especially if he has to come through qualifiers, as we know, he's not exactly the greatest player on the floor. So that's kind of a bit of an issue with him with the Euro Tour. If he can't get in off his own order of merit or off his own back, he doesn't really tend to come through. And so it wouldn't surprise me not to see him there. But yes, it's like I say, it's gone from being a field that's without lots of big names to being a few more in there. And another one I'll potentially throw in there, Adrian Lewis as well, who of course tested positive for coronavirus during the World Grand Prix and had to self-isolate, so had to pull out this past weekend, and as a result will drop money and drop down in the rankings as well in the order of merit. So yeah, very interesting week to come on the Europeans.
One of our final discussion points is we've got 4 new qualifiers for the PDC World Championship. A couple of names that Sam is very, very familiar with. Boris Karchmar, of course, Shoji, David Evans, and of course the Chinese qualifier as well. We'll start with David Evans. Been lucky enough to speak to David and see him on the BDO World Championship stage at the Indigo last year. And the form he's transferred from the Indigo to the Challenge Tour this year has been superb. And that final weekend, although it was quite a while ago now on the Challenge Tour, was something absolutely incredible. He came from a fair way down the order of merit to secure his World Championship place. And from what evidence I've seen of David Evans on the Live League and in the World Championship, he's going to be a very, very tough draw for somebody.
He's one of, in my opinion, the 2 out of the 4 of those qualifiers who nobody will want to draw. He made his European Tour debut this past weekend as well, beating Kai Gotthard, who was very good in the opening game. Scored very well. His doubles weren't great, Gotthard, but Evans got through in the end, and he showed some of that form in Sindelfingen that he's been showing on the Challenge Tour. But it's again a bit like with the European Championships, the qualification for that, like we spoke about earlier, with the Challenge Tour, because the season's so truncated at the moment. You had Evans come through. Ed House, of course, got a tour card as well. And it meant players like Scott Mitchell, who we all thought was a potential shoo-in to make the World Championships in the PDC for the first time, kind of fell by the wayside. And yeah, I'm very happy to see David at the World Championships, a person I've spoken to as well before, a very pleasant guy and a very, very good player. And he's one player I'm really looking forward to seeing at the World Championships, that's for sure.
Yeah, we know he's definitely got the stage game. And another player who's got a good stage game as well is Boris Karchmar. We've seen him now on the Pro Tour and a little bit on the European Tour, but he'll be very well known to soft tip fans for his exploits in the soft tip game. And now a second appearance, a long way on from his first appearance at the PDC World Championship. Bigger Boris is back.
He is indeed a personal favourite player of mine. I've watched a lot of soft tip over the years, and he's been the dominant force. He's, I believe, 3-time soft tip world champion. Got his tour card at the start of the year, beat Patrick Kovacs in the final, and averaged about 9, I believe, in the end of the final. And as we saw during the autumn series in particular, he was a player that the big names were drawing first round, and he was getting through. Michael Smith drew him 2 days running and lost both times. And yeah, he's a player that will continue to grow into the Pro Tour, in my opinion. He's shown some of that form so far, and it wouldn't even surprise me to see him at the World Cup next month with all the withdrawals at the moment. Him and Pera Lubic are two players who have competed on the PDC tour and a potential shoe-in to get into the World Cup as a replacement. So we might see him even before the Worlds. But yeah, I was very happy when he ended up winning over the weekend. I'm a big fan of his game, and I believe he can cause some real problems at the Worlds for sure.
Yeah, Lubic looked really good at the Euro Tour as well. The Chinese qualifier that we've got is, I believe, a first-time qualifier, Chenggan Liu. We've seen Zhao Shenzong a couple of times at the World Championship, and he hasn't looked too bad. Of course, played under the Target banner. And we've seen him at the World Cup as well. A new name to watch. And if he's beating players like Zong, I don't know if he was at the qualifier. You've got to assume he would. Then he must be decent.
It's his second time at the Worlds, actually. Competed all the way back in 2006. Lost to John Part in the first round. And he was, I believe, up to the Shanghai Darts Masters, the last one, which Michael Smith won. He was the record holder for the highest national average in China with 95.17. He lost to Rob Costo in the Shanghai Darts Masters. He's been on TV fairly recently, but that was 2 years ago. Zhao Chen Song-wise, I believe, I'm not 100% on this, so don't quote me on it, but I think he's had some sort of personal issues or something like that, because I don't believe he was at the World Cup qualifier, and I don't know if he was at the World Championship qualifier, but you've got to believe that he potentially wasn't. But yeah, a very experienced player. Also played well in the final, I believe. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see on his second appearance at the Alexandra Palace whether he can make the strides that the likes of Zhao Chen have made in the past few years, where the Chinese qualifier in the past has been a bit of an, I won't say an easy draw, because you don't really get any easy draws in the Worlds anymore, but hasn't exactly been the most difficult. But if he can bring that big stage game, especially over the shorter format, he might be able to cause some problems. But we'll soon see anyway.
Yeah, and our final qualifier to cover is Edward Shoji. The Japanese game has come on leaps and bounds over the past few years. The steel tip game, that is, and obviously Asada is the name that springs to mind. We've seen so many quality players from Japan compete on not just the PDC stage, but in the BDO as well. Even the female players, and Mikuru Suzuki and Kasumi Sato, they are both quality players, and there are a lot of good players in Japan. So to come through that qualifier, as Edward Shoji has done, shows some mettle, and he will now be a tough draw.
Yeah, I believe with he played Seigo Asada in the last stages, and Asada was 3-0 up on him in a race to 4, and he almost just fell apart. And it's a bit of a weird one to see Seigo Asada not at the World Championships, either in the BDO or the PDC. He's been a stalwart in it for a number of years. You kind of don't really think about it, the amount of times he competed at Lakeside as well. And he always used to bank on this route to get through the PDJ qualifier. Even when he won the Asian Tour the past 2 years, or won a spot through the Asian Tour, he always seemed to come through. And so, yeah, I'm surprised to see this winner come through. Like you say, though, Japanese game has come on leaps and bounds. We've had the likes of Asada, Yuki Yamada, who will be as a partner at the World Cup at the moment. Haruki Muramatsu, of course, who is a former PDC Tour card holder, very good at soft tip as well, one of the best in the world. As a result, I don't really know too much about Edward Shoji, despite knowing a fair bit about soft tip. Like maybe I might not know something that a lot of people know about this guy, but it'd be interesting to see how he acquits himself, and whether, if he's a good soft tip player, he can bring that up onto the big stage. Because we've seen with like Boris Krejcima, it's the same thing. He's been very good at soft tip, one of the best in the world. We've kind of seen this emergence of Japan, China, just Asia as a whole, being able to both play soft tip and steel tip and play it really well. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how he plays at the World Championships.
Yeah, so many new players we're going to get to see at the World Championship in December. Looking forward to seeing some new names, that's for sure. So that's it. Episode 3 of Darts News Weekly. In the 4th week, we will say, but we've covered some good stuff this week. Some new qualifiers, Euro Tour, and of course the first iteration of the Women's Tour. We're hoping to see more of that in the coming months and years. Thank you very much for joining me, Sam, and we'll see you soon.